I'm going to talk about a current research project of mine and introduce a project. It's a project still a work in progress. So I'm going to start with the film, and hopefully that's self-explanatory.
Unknown casualties as Pan Am jet crashes on a Scottish village. Eyewitnesses describe an explosion and a 300-foot fireball. Houses and cars are set on fire by burning debris. A Pan Am jumbo jet with 258 people on board has crashed tonight just north of the Scottish border. The plane disappeared off radar screens at 19 minutes past 7. Eyewitnesses said they heard a rumbling and then a terrible explosion. The plane hit a petrol station and nearby houses.
I suppose the catalyst for it all was what happened on the 21st of December 1988 when the Pan Am flight came down. Well, I'd not long just driven through Lockerbie with my wife and my young baby. And as I knew the area very well after living in Moffat for a few years, I was absolutely shocked, absolutely shocked.
At the time of the disaster, I was working in Lockerbie, and like anyone close by, I was very much affected by what happened. I was working in the school at the time. Not long after that, I saw some work that Keith had been producing. Arising from that, I wrote a poem feeling moved both by my own reactions, I suppose, to what had happened in the community and also by the drawings of the angel's head which Keith had come up with. He proposed to myself and separately to Karen Wimhurst, a composer with whom he'd worked before, that we might collectively work on a choral requiem.
And Douglas has actually written a poem which itemised 12 songs. And it was a poem about the Lockerbie disaster.
Over 30 years ago, I was working as a television director, and I made a programme called Songs for the Falling Angel. It was a performance at Greyfriars Church for that year's Edinburgh International Festival. It was a collaboration between a painter, Keith McIntyre, a composer, Karen Wimhurst, and a poet, Douglas Lipton. And today we're bringing back those three to look at the film and reflect on its legacy.
My immediate thoughts are how big a project it was, the scale of the tragedy.
The collaboration was incredibly important to me. Both Keith and Douglas were very local, had very strong local connections to Lockerbie and the surrounding area, which I felt I could just trust their judgment. It didn't feel like an ordinary commission. I do remember writing and looking at those images, just trying to really collaborate.
We were very conscious of, terrible loss that so many families had suffered, and the loss of the community, the damage which is, it will never be undone in Lockerbie. But at the same time, I think we felt it was necessary to try and produce something of beauty to kind of come out of the darkness.
Artists, because of their interest in the human condition, will want to find a way to express something that cannot be expressed in any other terms unless it's an artistic output. Because that's what art often does. It manages to sort of capture and release in us something that's visual or sound or spoken word that touches us in ways that the hard images of the graphic images, the storytelling, the media will do. Arts does it differently.
So I hope that gives you a taste of that film. The performance of Songs for the Falling Angel was a commission from the Edinburgh International Festival. Visual artist Keith McIntyre, poet Douglas Lipton, and composer Karen Wimhurst had proposed the idea of a creative work of art, a performance that would commemorate the 270 victims of the terrorist bombing of Pan Am 103. Inspired by McIntyre's vivid drawings and paintings of the motif of an angel's winged head, and Lipton's sequence of 12 poems drawing on a 7th century myth of a fiery cross that falls from the sky. With this new interdisciplinary collaboration came a polyphonic choral musical composition by Wimhurst with 2 female soloists, a soprano and an 11-year-old schoolgirl who lived in Lockerbie, together with the 16-voice choir accompanied by saxophone and harp. I directed an outside broadcast at the Edinburgh Festival in August 1991. And after documenting the performance over following weeks, filmed sequences with the contributors and edited together a 60-minute program which interwove the performance, documentary sequences, and STV's archived news footage from Lockerbie on the terrible night of the 21st of December 1988 and from the following days. The programme was screened on ITV across the UK on December the 22nd, 1991, just after the 3rd anniversary of the bombing. There were further live performances at Kelvin Grove Museum in Glasgow and at Crichton Memorial Church in Dumfries, but the programme wasn't screened again. This current research aims to examine the legacy of this programme and its impact on those artists who collaborated together on an ambitious multi-art form cultural commemoration of the victims of terrorism in the worst attack ever in Scotland. Back in 1991, artist, composer and poet were at an early stage of their careers, and this commission from the director of the Edinburgh Festival was a significant achievement for them. They sought to combine music, a poetic libretto and visual imagery to bring a sense of catharsis and healing. And now, 32 years later, I'm gathering their reflections on the importance of finding creative expression to respond to and remember the horror of that bomb and trace their careers over the past 3 decades and explore the legacy of the performances and assess the long-term impact of this creative expression in responding to an act of terrorism. My aim is to investigate research questions about creative artistic performances and memorials, events that commemorate terrorist attacks. And I'm aware that more and more memorials are treated as discursive spheres. I'm hoping that by stimulating this, perhaps it would be possible to make contact with other documentaries, other artists who have commemorated different acts of atrocity. The project can focus on Lockerbie, make contact with other universities, including Syracuse University in the USA, where there were 35 students who were killed in that disaster. Following on from reflecting on this single case study, it would be interesting to bring together academics from different disciplines in the arts and humanities, including music, visual arts, creative writing, film, architecture, to address research questions. What ways can artists creatively commemorate the victims of terrorism? And what are the challenges and ethical concerns for creating cultural events that memorialize these horrific events? In the course of this research, I became aware that this program would have been forgotten. It was almost forgotten by the three people who created it. Of course, they were bound up in the fact that it was the premiere of a very intensive piece of work that they'd done. The fact that I was filming them had almost disappeared from their consciousness. And when they came to talk together, it was like they were seeing it for the first time. I'm also aware that because the program kind of belongs to that area of arts and cultural programming made by Scottish television, it didn't reach the top of their agenda in terms of Scottish television actually documenting and cataloguing it. The only reason that I was able to access it from them, despite the fact that they're a public service broadcaster, they're an ITV franchise company that's been in continuous existence since 1957, the only one of the original franchise companies still in existence, it was still only because of my kind of privileged position that I knew that I had the original program number and could ask their film library to track it down and see if they had the original master. It was only because I was able to buttonhole their chief executive that I managed to persuade them to digitize a copy of the program. And I'm aware that's the danger of, and the challenge. I think this is a theme that a number of people have raised in different presentations today. So much material is in danger of disappearing. Scottish television is understandably interested in promoting and commercializing their archive. How do we encourage them to take a more distanced and more nuanced look at the archive in order to assess the cultural value of much of the material they hold there? And what I want to use this forum and this organization to ask, how do we better do that? How do we create those links between scholars in academia and the media archives and media organizations in order that this material isn't lost? How can we open up that access? Thank you very much. Yeah, it seems to me that there's a great imbalance between the BBC and the BFI, but the BBC as the national public broadcaster, and with ITV and Channel 4, and more recently with all the independent production companies, that skews the kind of history of broadcasting over the last 30 years. There is an extensive written archive at Caversham, which has been referred to in terms of people researching into the BBC. I wonder if it would be possible to do that sort of research into ITV in the same sort of way. I don't think so. I'm not sure about the challenges of doing that with all of Channel 4's archive. One of the things that I'm conscious of coming from Scotland is Scotland was really important. Channel 4 was really important for Scotland in terms of its output, and yet in the scholarly work about Channel 4, there's hardly any reference to Scotland and the Scottish companies and the impact there. So I don't know how to answer. And with STV, they don't have the resources. Their whole ethos is led by creating shareholder value, and understandably, that's what they are. So how can they be nudged into recognizing the wide cultural value of lots of the archive material that they have? Yes, on New Year's Eve, we'll see an archive program with lots of tartan and rootin' and tootin' about bits and pieces from Scottish television's archive, but there's no interrogation with it. And I wonder how they can be persuaded or where the resources might be found.